But anyway, just learn a few basic principles like that. There is no everlasting. There's no such word. Christ never spoke of anyone being tortured or punished in a place called hell and all of that. But then we do have to answer these questions. What about, it's better to cut off your arm than to be cast into Gehenna fire. But what is the Gehenna fire, see? Well, it is a judgment for sure, but it's not hell, it's not literal fire, it's not forever, and so on. But on the other hand, I don't want to take away from the severity of the really evil people who will go into judgment. It will be horrible. It will be horrible, for sure. It will be horrible. But God is fair in judgment. Those that are worthy of a few stripes only get a few stripes. Those that are worthy of many, they're going to get many. Of course, the whole idea of judgment, the church has not a clue, not even a clue, as to what the judgments of God are all about. All they know is eternal punishment in hell. That judgment is where you get sentenced to eternal punishment in hell. That's what the judge, God judges in righteousness, Mercy shall triumph over judgment, it says. Mercy shall triumph over judgment. How could mercy triumph over judgment if there's never any mercy upon those that go into judgment? Right? Major contradictions there in the Christian teaching. Of course, the only reason we have this teaching is they use it for the same reason all the other countries use it. Fear tactic. Keep the people in line. When the lawyers and the intelligentsia of Greece went down ancient Greece, went down to Egypt, it's all these gods and all this paraphernalia. What is all this stuff? He said, well, this is what we teach the people. They don't fear going to jail for stealing or something. You tell them they're going to burn in hell for all eternity and put the fear in them. And so how do you do it? Well, we invent all these gods and all this junk about where they go through all these, and all this suffering and all this stuff. But if you're good, then you get to ride on the boat of millions of years with the sun god Ra floating across the ocean of the sky and so on. And so, you read Thayer's paper on everlasting punishment, and you got dozens of historians. They said, wow, what a great idea. What a great idea. We take that back to Greece. They took it back to Greece. And they start teaching all this stuff, and their poets start writing poetry about all these gods of the underworld, and all this stuff. And some of them retain almost the same names. Of course, the one time you find the word in 2 Peter where the angels were changed in hell, the word is Tartarus. Tartarus is not even a Greek word. Tartarus is an Egyptian word. Tartaru was the lowest of the underworld, see, in the Egyptian hell. And now Tartarus is said to be the lowest place of torment in the Greek hell. They just pass it on. And now all the countries of the world have this hell. Where did they get it? They got together one time. Dr. Martin talks about that. He says not too many historians know about it, but it's documented. I don't know when. 1200 BC, I don't know when it was. There was this great ingathering in Babylon from all around the world. From China. Everywhere. Doctors, lawyers, scholars came to Babylon for an exchange of knowledge and information. They were there for years. They had to really learn their languages even to communicate a lot. They were there for years, and they exchanged all their knowledge. Mathematics, medicine, religion. And they went back to their homelands. And that's why virtually every nation of the world has the same beliefs as the ancient Egyptians, which was the first real civilized nation. So it all came from. So that's why there's a Chinese hell. They didn't invent it on their own. They got it out of Babylon. Babylon got it from the Egyptians. And that's why these stories are similar all around the world. And they're all a hoax. That's why I start off my paper. The subtitle of Part D is, "The Christian hell is a Christian hoax. The Islam hell is a Muslim hoax. The Jewish hell is a Jewish hoax. The Greek hell is a Greek hoax. The Egyptian hell is an Egyptian hoax. The Hindu hell is a Hindu hoax. The Buddhism hell is a Buddhism hoax. And every other hell of every culture on earth is a man-made hoax." For nearly 6,000 years, the religious and civil leaders of virtually every major nation, culture, religion on earth have used the fear and terror of future hell to keep the dumb sheep obedient to the whims of their leaders. That's my opening statement.
I always thought some man back in Egypt, there had to be one man who came up with that. The whole idea, the concept of hell. Some guy was sitting there smoking something and came up with it.
You know, some of it goes back to whatever chronicles they had before the flood. I forget the guy's name now, Rezion or whatever, was one of the children of Japheth, I guess. The first place where they gathered after the flood was Babylon, which is in Mesopotamia, probably near Baghdad. And there they built a tower and all of that. So that was the first real congregation of humanity after the flood to try to form one kind of a city-state. Of course, God confounded the languages and they went away. So anybody who was there certainly knew what was contained in the Chronicles that Noah brought through the flood. And he had to bring Chronicles through the flood. Or how did Moses, centuries and centuries later, how did he know to write the book of Genesis or any of this stuff, you see? This is the scroll of the generations of Adam. What scroll? He had a scroll. He wasn't making this up on the top of his head, Moses. He had a scroll. He had genealogies of Adam and his children and all of that. You see, he had that. And certainly he took that through the flood because somehow Moses got a hold of them. Moses had those, or at least copies of them, of those scrolls. Well, anybody who went to Babylon knew what was in these scrolls. So when the Egyptians went to Egypt, they did seem to excel those that stayed back in Mesopotamia, although some try to say Mesopotamia, was was maybe the earliest, but it seems evident that Egypt had their own written language before Mesopotamia, although there was some exchange of information back and forth. But what I was going to say is some of these pagan teachings, I think, go back to these scrolls. Satan said, the serpent said, "You shall not surely die." Of course, all humanity and every theologian on earth today virtually still believes that lie. You're an immortal soul. You can't die, you see. So, they believed not God, but they believed the serpent. You got a soul. You shall not die. The teaching of a soul started in Egypt. They were the first people to talk about there's something inside of you doesn't die. A lot of their culture, I think, started out around these stories of creation, which they started to get all screwed up. Even the pyramid. The pyramid came from what they called the Ben stone. And what was that? That was what appeared on the second day after the water subsided and dry land appeared. And they pictured it as a high point, not that just vast continents appeared, but that one point of land appeared as the water. They call that the Ben stone or something. But they pictured it as a pointed thing. Hence their pyramids. But it was all corrupted, It was all corrupted. Of course, the Egyptians had a lot of gods, but one of their very first gods was Adam. Where'd they get that? Adam. So rather than worshiping the true God, they worshipped Adam, the first man, you see. So we got worshiping men as gods. And then we have these rulers in Egypt who then thought of themselves as God. See? And, over time it just all got corrupted. And then, of course, the idea of frightening people into being good, that seemed to work out. And so they just built. And it got more and more elaborate. I mean, you can see some of the early writings of Egypt. They were not nearly as evolved as they were later on. All of the Horus and Isis and all of these gods, they came centuries and centuries later, but now they're part of Egyptian religion. They're all gods. See, you got to go through these gods in the underworld if you're going to be judged righteous. You can ride on the boat of millions of years, as they call it, which their way of saying a long time, I guess. Or you could go to the field of reeds. In the underworld, there was this hell, with all kinds of horrible things that happened. But there's also the fields of reeds. And what it was like a river, reeds and water, similar to the Nile up on the surface of the world. And so when you died, if you were good, you would get a beautiful little farm in the field of reeds where you could raise your crops, make your beer. They were big on beer and all of this. And these were called the fields of reeds. Now, what do we find in Hades? Well, they had two compartments. They had this place with all the fire and all the torch and everything else. But what else is found in Hades? The Elysian fields. The Elysian fields, right out of Egypt. And the fields of reeds. They turned it into the Elysian fields, and these were places where you could frolic out in the fields and with plenty of food and all this. It's all pagan, every bit of it.